Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. My name is Rich Dione. I'm the co-director of the Fusion Studio for Entertainment and Engineering here at Purdue University. Normally with me is my co-director, Brandon Folk. He is out of town on a recruitment trip, as I understand it, or an alumni trip, one of those two things. Today, we're here to talk about artificial intelligence and how it relates to the entertainment industry. With two guests, Eric Sampson, who is a professor of philosophy here at Purdue University, who explores questions of ethics and AI. And then Erica Bondarev Rapach, I almost got it wrong, but then I caught myself, thank you, who is a marketer and an entrepreneur and an artist who's been exploring and playing in this area for some time to present to us some information about the state of AI, the state of conversations about ethics in this space, some of what's happening in the entertainment industry in terms of artificial intelligence. We've all agreed that we want to be really clear at the outset that about a couple of things. This is such a new moment in this space that there's nobody who we could really say is an expert. And so nobody is purporting to have to be an expert in any of this today. And it's all moving and changing so fast that heaven knows that by the time we're done in the next 45 minutes, everything we started saying at the beginning could be different. So just let's all keep that in mind as we go. And we're going to do something a little different today. When we were prepping for this meeting, we decided we wanted to put a poll out there. So I'm going to do something I've not tried. It may or may not work, but we're going to launch a Zoom webinar poll here and ask you all to answer these two very simple questions while we start the presentations. What do you know about AI in the entertainment industry? And how do you feel about the use of AI in the entertainment industry? And just because I like to be a little cheeky, you've got 4 options there. Super excited, this changes everything. I'm intrigued by the possibilities, but generally hopeful. I'm somewhat wary, and I've got a bad feeling about this. This is probably going to end badly. So feel free to answer those questions. That'll provide us some feedback for how we're going to proceed with the conversation a little bit later. With that, I just said a whole lot of things. Welcome, Eric. Welcome, Erica. We're going to turn to Eric first. He's going to show us some slides and talk a little bit. We'll pivot to Erica, and then we'll open it up to the group. So thank you all for being here, and here we go.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you. I'm just going to talk briefly about what artificial intelligence can do as it concerns the entertainment industry, and then highlight some moral and political concerns you might have about it. Of course, hopefully along the way, I'll mention some hopeful things about artificial intelligence and its use. But before we start this conversation, Erica and Rich and I were talking about how you can't really cover everything there is about this issue. So I'm just going to highlight some of the big issues here. So a lot of reflection recently on the ethics of AI and its use in entertainment began with the writer's strike just about 9 months ago or so, where writers were concerned about the use of AI in entertainment. And what exactly were their concerns? Well, many, but one of them was the concern that writers would be replaced, or that they would have their jobs sort of distorted in unrecognizable ways by artificial intelligence. So with the rise of ChatGPT just about a year ago, we can generate text, whole scripts, pretty quickly just by issuing some text prompts into ChatGPT and similar chatbots. And it does a pretty good job of generating these things. Of course, it's going to need some guidance in the early days, but writers were worried that it looks like this technology that can generate lots of text, can generate plots, can generate ideas, is going to replace what writers do, or at least if not replace them, then that studios would pressure writers to begin to use this technology in the production of their scripts. And of course, there were concerns that AI is an art, or that it has no soul, or that it's going to drastically reduce the value of the skill that writers have. And you may wonder, if you're not especially familiar with ChatGPT or the technology that's available, even right this second, you should know that it's pretty good, and it's as bad as it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better from here. So here's just a slide that shows you how ChatGPT does on a number of exams that people often take. For instance, the LSAT, it scores over the 80th percentile. So it's better than 80% of people who take the LSAT. And already people who take the LSAT, that's the law school admissions test. Already people who take the LSAT are probably smarter than your typical student. So it does 80% better than even those really smart people. You can see a number like the GRE, it scores in the 99th percentile. And this slide is old. It's about 6 months old. So it's only going to get better from here. So that's just to say that if you're wondering, like, is this really a threat to that? Well, yeah. I mean, already it writes papers that are significantly better than student papers. That's one of the ways that I catch my students in using artificial intelligence, is that this sounds way better than a college student could produce. So yeah, it's pretty good. And as I say, it's only going to get better. So that's one of the concerns, is that writers are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence. Another concern, so this is just another way to see that this is a legitimate concern even today. So there's a show that runs now and has run for about a year now called Nothing Forever. It's an artificially intelligent, it's an AI produced show. Of course, it has humans who sort of guide it along the way, but it's sort of a riff off of Seinfeld, where it produces lots of Seinfeld-like scripts, all generated by artificial intelligence. The voices are are the use of artificial intelligence. So basically what it does is it gets trained on particular voices. It then can generate any sort of text in voice form once it learns sort of how that voice is used. So for instance, you can imitate Jerry Seinfeld's voice. There's tons of backlog of Jerry Seinfeld stand-up and him and Seinfeld, and so you can easily produce Seinfeld saying virtually anything that you want because it's trained on his voice. So this show that ran on Twitch streamed 24 hours a day, AI-generated scripts, AI-generated voices, and people love it. So if you just go to the Wikipedia page for Nothing Forever as enthusiastic fans, and it's virtually an entirely AI-generated show, and it exists today. And so here's just another sort of example of the use of AI. So there's the script generating sort of concern. Another concern is the use of people's faces. So in 1977, in Star Wars: A New Hope, Peter Cushing played the role of Grand Moff Tarkin. He died in 1994, and nevertheless, in 2016, he shows up in Rogue One, which is another Star Wars story. How does that happen? Well, they basically trained an artificial intelligence on lots of footage of Peter Cushing, got us a sense of what his face looks like, and then they had an actor sort of act in various ways and overlaid Peter Cushing's face on that actor so that now it looks as if Peter Cushing is there. Did they have Peter Cushing's consent to do this? No, not him, the person. Now they got the consent of his estate, but of course, Peter Cushing never could have dreamed. He died in 1994. He could have never dreamed that his face, his likeness, his image would show up later down the road, along with his voice. So they, trained artificial intelligence, trained his voice, was trained on his voice, and then it could produce the sounds of Peter Cushing's voice. So another concern is just that for any actor who plays a role now, once there's enough, and it doesn't take much of your voice and your face and your likeness and your movements, AI can be trained to generate all sorts of other things that look like you, acting in all sorts of ways, maybe ways that you would never approve of, maybe saying things that you would never approve of, or just saying things and doing things in a artistically bad form so that it makes you look bad just because it's, shoddy artwork. That's another concern that people have had. Let me just mention two more, and that has to do with something like addiction or the really awesome quality of entertainment as it goes over. So one thing to be excited about artificial intelligence is that it's going to get really, really good. The cost of producing it is going to go down. The volume of it is going to go up. And artificial intelligence is going to get better at learning what you like and then shoving that sort of in your face. That's basically what TikTok does. If you're familiar with that platform, basically what it does is it shows you lots of videos that are produced by just people out in the world, and it learns how long you stay on a video, what you like, who you follow, and by doing that, it learns what kinds of videos that you like, and it will continually show you those videos. As you use the platform more and more, it gets better and better at showing you things that you like. This is why people spend tons of hours on TikTok, because after they used it enough, the algorithm sort of understands what you like and continues to give it to you. There's a concern that something like that could happen in the entertainment industry with your shows, with your art, with your music, that it's going to be so great, the quality is going to be so good, at least as it concerns you, that you'll stay on it for large periods of time. And it's going to be more interesting than any other things that you could be doing. So for instance, one thing you should be doing is you should be studying, or you should be reading, or you should be developing your character. But if watching certain forms of entertainment is more fun than that, then doing those sorts of hard work things that make you a better person, then you're going to be more inclined to do those. So for instance, most of us have something like this smartphone. This is really fun. Smartphones are really good at showing you what you like. And we all have the problem where we're too attached to our phones. We like it too much when we should be doing our work, when we should be doing things that make us better or improve our career. We prefer to do the fast and easy, quick, fun thing over the hard and difficult and better thing for us. So that's another concern. Some people call this hijacking your cognitive agency. That is, it makes it more difficult for you to do the kinds of things you want to do because there's this really nice, sweet, wonderful thing that lies right next to you. Last concern is associated with this, which is that many people today are going through what has been called a friendship recession. So let me just mention I'll just show you sort of the four big concerns that I've mentioned here. The mass unemployment, the copyright sort of concerns, the undermining of our cognitive agency. And the last one is if you poll lots of people right now about how many close friends they have or how many people they talk to throughout the day, and you compare that to, say, 30 years ago, you'll notice that there's people have significantly fewer friends and significantly fewer close friends than they did in the past. What explains that? Well, one thing might be that the entertainment that we have is way better now than it was in the past. In the past, if you stay home, you have to watch whatever happens to be on TV that day. And it's, there's just a small number of shows and they're not especially great. I mean, they're fine for what they are, but these days you can have a huge amount of shows. The quality of those shows is excellent. It's virtually costless to engage with those shows. And so you're less likely to go out and to make friends where you have to, go through awkward conversations and, awkward silences and things like that. Those aren't fun. It's much more fun to stick around and stay at home where we have excellent entertainment. So that is one hypothesis about what's contributed in a large part to the friendship recession. And so if AI and the entertainment that it produces for us is even better than we have now, it's just going to raise the cost of going out and meeting up new people and lower the cost of staying in and enjoying a night on your own. If that's right, then we're not going to have as many friends as we did in the past. And you might think that friendship is one of the best parts of living a good life. If you think about what people are concerned about on their deathbed, it's not that they didn't consume enough entertainment, that they didn't make enough money. What most people are concerned about is that they didn't spend enough time with their loved ones, with their friends, that they didn't interact with people enough. And this is a concern that I think we should all be worried about. It's great to have wonderful technology that's catered to you, that you love, but there's a cost, and we should just be aware of it. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Eric. I would love to chat. I have so many thoughts, but I will move to my official portion of the presentation, and then hopefully we can move into that as we get to the end here of the formal portion. Let me just pull my deck up. Do you see that, Eric?
Yes, I see.
Great, thank you. All right, so I am going to, there's a little bit of overlap with what Eric and I are saying, but I'm just going to sort of come at it from more specifically kind of an artist and an arts marketer perspective. And that is, I guess I'm just going to start with this assumption I'm sharing with all of you, which is that AI isn't going anywhere, and that my approach to AI has been to lean into what I'm calling cautious optimism. And another way of saying that, and you've probably heard this analogy many times, it's probably the strongest one out there in the media when we talk about AI, but that AI and humans are co-pilots. Yes, there are some, fascinations about AI taking over the world in sort of a sci-fi way, but really there is a lot of indication that AI, to be effective or to be most effective, needs a human co-pilot. So that is also an assumption I am kind of coming from when I present this information. I just want to kind of remind everybody that there has been multiple instances in our history where people have been afraid of, nervous about, angry about new technology and new tools. And a very, very long ago example is that this is the gentleman who invented the sewing machine. And he did that in 1830. And at the time, he was French, and all of the French tailors went on rioted because they were so concerned that sewing machines were going to take their jobs. So this is, again, repeated history with a new tool to the toolbox. And I'm sure all of you have at least a memory of when cell phones came onto the market. So that would be a more modern example. But I just illustrate this sewing machine example to say that this has been going on for centuries. I just also wanted to share a few resources in my presentation. So this is the gentleman. If you're not familiar with him, I would encourage you to look up. His name is Ethan Mollick, and as you can see here, he's a professor in academia. He's at Wharton School of Business, and he has been talking about AI for a long time. In fact, before it's actually AI just had its first, ChatGPT just had its first birthday yesterday. But Ethan Mollick has been in the AI space for a long time, and in the the intersection of AI and education. He has this Substack blog called One Useful Thing, which is where the screenshot is from. So if you are interested in continuing to engage in this subject, his writing on this matter is very accessible, but also very much from an academic standpoint. He has actually incorporated AI into his classroom assignment. So instead of sort of going towards, I literally just saw a Facebook post the other day from a friend of mine on Facebook who teaches that was like, oh my gosh, what do I do when I can tell my students' work has been generated by AI? And it was really interesting to watch all of the comments on that. There is one fallacy in that statement that I'll talk about in a minute, but Professor Malik has decided to lean into the other direction, which is that he actually has many of his assignments are about using AI to accomplish something. Now, granted, he teaches in a business school, and it's so maybe that's more realistic for a business school, but I just offer him as someone to pay attention to as you explore this process and this tool yourself. So back to the statement on Facebook that my students are turning in work that's been AI generated. These three characteristics of AI you see on the screen now are actually the way that Ethan Malik talks about AI. So I'm taking these from him, but I totally agree with them. And that is to say that AI is undetectable. It really only takes a very, very small amount of editing to something that AI has generated for the detection tools to be able to tell it was AI generated. So he really asserts that detection is not very possible. He also says things like, I won't accept good work now, I have to have great work, because he knows students have access to these tools, which leads me to the second characteristic, which is ubiquitousness, meaning that AI has universal accessibility. It is regardless of student and teacher demographics, geographical boundaries, financial barriers. There are all sorts of AI tools, including ChatGPT, who are available. I mean, you do need an internet connection, so that begs the question about sort of the tech disparity when it comes to internet access. But if you have that, you have access to these tools. And then the last characteristic we like to think about when we think about AI is that it's transformative. It is, if you're very close to the subject, you're feeling this, and even if you're not super close to AI, you've at least probably read one or two headlines about the fact that it's really disrupting almost everything we do now. So to that end, as it shows up in academia in particular, and in the workplace, which are sort of the two areas I'm touching on here, is that in a lot of ways, because of its undetectableness, it's redefining plagiarism and asking the question, what is plagiarism now? One of the beauties of AI is that as long as you are putting in your own thoughts, it can't be plagiaristic, because it's your own IP that you're entering into the tool. Now, if you're entering other people's information into AI, then there is a question of intellectual property. But when it's your own thoughts and your own content, which coming from an artist perspective is often what we're doing, that is when you're in the sort of safe zone in terms of IP. In terms of ubiquitousness, again, because everyone has access, literally AI can help everyone. AI can help teachers, students, artists, professionals all do their jobs, research better. It is really a tool that can be used to benefit everyone. And I thought this was an interesting statistic. This actually does come from one of Ethan Malik's TED Talks, which is that AI is garnering a 20 to 80% improvement in white collar tasks, which is compared to what was known as a 25% improvement with steam power and the Industrial Revolution. So while that range is big, it has potential to really improve performance in certain kinds of jobs. So to that end, I want to draw your attention to another resource, which is a website literally called willrobotstakemyjob.com. So that is the link. And I'm going to now take you to a little walkthrough of some jobs on that website. So as you'll see here, if you go to the site, you can put in a job like a set designer, and it's saying that there is a 0% chance of risk of it being replaced because of things like these qualities. Makeup artist. Let's slow this down just a little bit. Makeup artist has minimal risk. Now, this is about dexterity, which I think is incredibly important. And we're going to talk about in just a minute about one of the things AI will never have, which is dexterity. So makeup artist has a low risk of being replaced by robots. If you enter a marketing manager, per se, which is something I was interested in, you start to see 18% of risk being replaced. But again, you still have these characteristics, persuasion, negotiation, originality, that make it difficult. And then what's interesting is when you put in something like a fine artist, you get a higher rate. You get a 42% rate. Now, of course, originality can never be replaced by a robot, but and as is some of the dexterity questions, But it does, for me, beg the question, what defines art, which is sort of where Eric started this presentation, which is that the big question, which is something generated by AI with a human considered art? So I just assert, of course, again, how we teach and learn, our professions and our practices, our work tasks and our processes and our creativity are shifting and changing. And I guess my suggestion is that we have to shift and change as well. And my question do most of that, but at the end of the day, that's also very much the charge of an artist. And usually what an artist is thinking and working about is how to change, how to create change, and how to be literally creative. So four of the characteristics that AI lack are critical thinking, context, decision-making. Those three, I think, are fairly self-explanatory, but the last one I just want to touch on because of the comments for things like makeup artists and even artists when it comes to things like dexterity, is that AI does not have a human body. And this means that they are limited. AI is limited. I don't know what their pronouns are. AI is limited based on the fact that it does not have a human body and it is a machine. I'll come back to that in just a moment. But next, So next, I wanted to just share this quote, which speaks to those first three characteristics. I'm just going to give it a second here to let you read that quote, and so I don't have to read it out loud to you. And I'll go ahead and read it, actually, just in case some of you are just listening in and not watching. But instead of focusing on the projected adoption of AI in every facet of our lives, consider honing in on what is un-AIable. Un-AIable actions are tasks and skills that cannot be digitized or automated. These routines require humans to constantly be in the loop and make key and pivotal decisions. So in a lot of ways, this speaks to that critical thinking and decision-making that AI lacks. This comes from Dr. Brandeis Marshall, who has many faculty roles, including a stint at Purdue University. And then with the dexterity and the human body, the lack of a body, which I had found to be really interesting. This is from Arthur Glenberg and Cameron Robert Jones, who are at Arizona State University and University of California, San Diego, respectively. And basically, they say that ChatGPT-3, its successor, ChatGPT-4, and all of the cousins of large language models do not have bodies, and so they cannot determine on their own which objects are foldable, or the many other properties that the psychologist J.J. Gibson calls affordances. Given people's hands and arms, paper maps afford fanning a flame, and thermoses afford rolling out wrinkles. With arms and hands, large language models cannot determine these affordances. It can only fake them if it has run across something similar in the stream of words on the internet. Will a large language model AI ever understand language the way humans do? In our view, not without having a human-like body, senses, purposes, and ways of life. So again, just summing up some of these ways in which AI has, these are these characteristics that AI, at least at the moment, lacks. But again, and here they are, but what I would like to drive home is that these are characteristics that artists and creatives not only have, but we excel at. And these characteristics are, in my opinion, at the foundation of our work. So I'm going to wrap up here with just a few moments about myself and how this has impacted me in my AI wanderings over about the last year, which is not a very long period of time. But I have worked in the arts management sector for almost 2 decades, and I left that all behind. I have an arts management degree and training, and I've worked in marketing jobs and executive leadership. And I left that all behind at the end of 2022 and went out on my own. And I'm launching a fashion brand called Individu.art, which is going to a movement to bring customers closer to sustainability with style maximalism that minimizes harm to people and planet. And you might be asking, why is she talking about this now and what does this have to do with AI? But the only reason I could make this career switch, well, one of the only reasons, but one of the most key reasons is because of AI. I have had access to AI tools, as I've talked about, with that ubiquitousness. And so as someone who has very little drawing skills, technical skills, the opportunity to use these tools in ways to create imagery, this idea of text imagery, and even just using ChatGPT in my research, in exploring the AI world, that's a little meta to use AI to research AI. But anyway, this has been all opened up because of the access to AI. I've also found the community of people excited about AI to be very, very welcoming. And so I've made a lot of work. I was very interested in this friendship conversation and sort of the value of friendship and whether quantity is more important than quality. But anyway, that's for another discussion, but it is interesting when I think about, as I've gone through this career change, I've basically been reintroducing myself into a new professional community that has a lot of AI. It's fashion, but it's also fashion with an AI and tech focus. And that community has been very welcoming. The other things I would mention is that my business model is going to be made to order apparel, meaning it's customized to each individual person who is purchasing it with no inventory made up front, and that's partly for sustainability reasons. But the tool that will allow me to do this is based on AI. It is generated from AI data, as is the textiles I want to design for my apparel. The only reason I can design those textiles is because I can use AI tools that allow me to describe my textile or my fabric, and it outputs something, and then I can iterate it based on my artistic aesthetic. So I am a personal case, and basically I've revealed my bias, which is that I very much feel that I have only, one of the reasons I've been able to make this career change, and I'm so excited about it, is because of the ubiquitousness and the accessibility and basically the way AI has entered our life most prevalently in the last year. So thank you, and this is my. You can scan this QR code for my, I think it goes to my business card, which will take you to my LinkedIn profile. I also just wanted to mention this entire presentation is built by Gamma, which is actually a presentation software that's AI AI informed, which might not surprise you. And all the imagery you saw in the presentation is generated by AI at my prompting. So I am going to unshare my screen, if I can figure out how to do that.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but that felt a little bit like a fire hose.
Sorry.
No, for both, it was just a lot of information. It wasn't you,
Yeah.
Eric. It was just, there was a lot of information to listen to. I thought to get us kicked off with some questions. First, I'll share that the results of the poll are a classic bell curve. About 17% of people are super excited that this is the way that everything's going to change. That 8% of people are like, oh my God, this is the end of the world and Skynet's going to destroy everything. And then 67% of folks are leaning more excited in the middle, and 42% of folks are leaning a little more wary in the middle, which is good. We are a perfect cross section. So wonderful, everybody. And there's some interesting comments in the sort of short answer that kind of express those things. There's concerns about theft and IP protection. There are folks who say that I don't really know a whole lot about this right now. As is always the case, legal frameworks have not caught up with technological advancements. And I think at the risk of saying something that I'm not trained in, and Eric will correct me, I suspect also ethical frameworks haven't always caught up to where we are technologically, and that's probably not new in this case either. So that's what we heard in the poll, which was great. I also, because I was curious, while we were talking, I went to ChatGPT 3.5 and I said, generate a question for a panel on AI and entertainment. So here we go. Here is the question.
That is very meta.
Right? Doing all well, I have another thing that I did with ChatGPT that I want to share as well. But how can the integration of AI in entertainment enhance creativity, storytelling, and user experiences while addressing ethical considerations and ensuring inclusivity in the industry? Which I think is kind of why we're here. I mean,
did we just answer that?
That I think that's a really fascinating response for AI to generate with just the prompt, generate a question for a panel on AI and entertainment. So do either of you want to tackle that very big, huge question?
So remind me, so one was about well, how do you integrate this and make it inclusive? And what was the first part? Oh, how do to make it more creative or
to enhance creativity, storytelling, and user experiences.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's going to enhance creativity. It might. I mean, so at least we're going to get more creative stuff. Is it going to make human beings more creative? I don't know. It remains to be seen. But certainly because it can produce just an enormous amount of stuff, and it can sort of riff off of those things. So basically what artists do is they sort of look at what past artists have done, and they sort of carry on in the same way. Of course, they make their own adjustments, and that's a slow sort of progression that happens over time. Of course, that'll be sped up because basically what AI is doing is it's looking at past stuff and sort of going on in the same way, but it can do it much faster, whereas it takes us a little bit of time to sort of, make the artistic work. They can do it more or less instantaneously, and then see what they've done, and then sort of carry on in the same way. So we're going to get lots of creative stuff. I guess it's going to change the way human beings are creative. So for many of us, we're going to have to get better and more creative at guiding AI and sort of prompting it and pushing it and nudging it and thinking about possibilities, being creative about the sorts of questions that we ask it, or the prompts that we give it. That's certainly going to be true. In terms of inclusion, I mean, one thing to be pretty optimistic about is that now, as the technology becomes cheaper and more available to everyone, they can sort of begin to generate the kinds of artistic works that they would have always hoped would be generated by experts in the field, but they never were because of concerns about because of exclusion in various ways. Now that sort of thing can be more widely available, and you can more quickly and cheaply generate the kinds of art that have been underrepresented in the past. Of course, one concern is that if what it's looking at is artworks that have been uninclusive in the past, and then it sort of spits out something in the same way, it's also going to be uninclusive, but hopefully that can be overcome with human ingenuity and creativity with the prompts that you give it. So those are at least some.
Sure. Erica, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think I'm really glad Eric mentioned the sort of implicit bias that we're already seeing in AI, because at the end of the day, that wasn't a big part of in fact, I should have touched on that, because I think it's actually really important to note that AI is very much a reflection of humanity. And I think part of this is we're not liking what we're seeing back because it's showing our own faults in a lot of ways and our own biases. And so I think it's really important to note that it's the whole crap in, crap out analogy. Like, we have to train AI with an awareness of our already existing inequities, which I think is really, it's going to be tricky. Because we've been trying to theoretically address those equities in lots of other ways, and this is yet again another tool. But what are the odds that this is going to be the thing where we do it? I don't know. I don't have an answer on that. Your conversation about creatives and what artists are doing, Eric, reminded me of this Paul Gauguin quote that I've always loved, which is, art is either plagiarist or a revolution, or plagiarist or revolutionary, something like that. And I think this is it. Like, you're either copying what's been done before you, or you're charting new territory, and it's called revolutionary, and that can be a turnoff to some people, or it can be exciting. And I think by kind of definition, AI is doing that for artists. I also just want to do one more personal reflection on this equity question, and I want to and I don't mean to keep making this about me and my career change, but I really just want to say that I am like an example of where these tools have allowed me, created somewhat of an equitable playing field. And what I want to say is that, Eric, I loved when you talked about the TikTok. I have 2 teenage daughters. They are on TikTok way too much. It scares the hell out of me, because I watch this addiction. It's like, and I'm not addicted either. Here's my phone. It's right here because it's like a security blanket. But there is power in the algorithm, because I have, in the past year, as I've left kind of the performing arts world, and I've wanted to enter the fashion world, have literally trained the algorithms on all of my social media, LinkedIn, Instagram. I don't use TikTok as much. Facebook to some extent, but not as much. But LinkedIn and Instagram, where I'm really trying to get content about the fashion world and like look for jobs, I have trained the algorithm now to deliver that content to me. And we could spend an hour talking about the kinds of opportunities that have come my way because I have found content, or let me be clear, the content has found me based on training these algorithms. And I really believe that it's helping me change my career, like no joke, into a more creative profession. But it could be done for anybody based on access to those tools to start learning more about where you might want to go next.
I think there's a lot of really interesting things to peel apart there, right? Again, we could do this conversation for 3 hours and probably not get bored, I suspect. A couple of things I just wanted to hit on. I've heard it called various things. I tend to think of it as blank page syndrome. And if you are a writer or a painter or any kind of an artist, it's a thing that's very real. It's you look at the page and you want to start something, and you have an idea, but you can't start. And there are lots of techniques, and we can argue about the discipline that's required to learn those techniques and put them into play. But some of these tools can be a way to jumpstart that process, right? And I have heard of artists using it for just that reason, right? Like, just give me an image that looks kind of like this, and then I'm going to make it look not at all like that, but I needed something to start. So I just wanted to put that out there because you both kind of referred to that.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
this is one
yeah.
way that it could actually enhance creativity, which is when you're stuck,
Right.
it's sort of another conversation partner to sort of bounce ideas off
Right.
of. And of course, artists aren't, especially like, screenwriters and novelists aren't just going to copy and paste from ChatGPT and put it into their book. It's not going to produce that good of stuff. And also there's no achievement in that. So, but one thing it can do is, yeah, sort of offer you ideas and sort of serve as a sounding board. And that's just like what we already do with, people when we are stuck, we may go talk to a friend, and this is going to sort of lower the cost of having a person to bounce ideas off of. Of course, it's not a person, but it's a thing that you can sort of explore ideas with.
So another thing that I asked ChatGPT about, I'm not going to read all of this because it gave me a very long and very comprehensive and well-written answer. But I said, how might AI be used in entertainment? And I'm just going to give you the high points. It basically identified 12 ways that I think are kind of interesting, many of which we've touched upon. But I appreciate the meta-ness of its being aware of this. Content creation and generation, which we've talked about, personal content recommendations, which we've talked about, interactive experiences, AI-powered interactive storytelling, and I have worked with artists who are working on this, both in terms of text generation and animation generation to go along with that text, facial recognition and animation, voice and speech recognition. We already deal with that. If you haven't spoken to Siri or Alexa, if you have, you've done this. Real-time translation. We're currently looking at ways to do real-time captioning and language translation of captioning at Purdue here in the theater department. Predictive analytics for audience engagement, AI chatbots for audience engagement, all things that we experience every day. Enhanced gaming experiences, automated content moderation, virtual influencers and performers. That kind of scares me a little bit. And dynamic pricing, revenue optimization, some things we haven't talked about. But I thought that was really fascinating that it was able to parse enough information on the internet to put together a really fascinating answer. And one more thing that I want to throw out in the conversation, then we'll open it up to questions for the group. I want to be really careful when I talk about this topic. That AI is a big term that covers a lot of things. And we tend, at least in modern news and media versions of it, we're talking about large language models and ChatGPT, but that is only one part of the picture, right? Machine learning, which is really what's behind these AI things. There are a bunch of different ways in which machine learning functions. And it's probably surrounding us in ways we don't realize, right? Traffic light signals and timing are backed by machine learning in some cases. Self-driving cars, there's all sorts of things that are happening. We've got a group of students at Purdue who are examining the use of whether machine learning algorithms can be used to help automated scenery make choices about what to do if something goes wrong, right? Can I slow down enough to have an actor get out of the way if they're moving behind their cue, and then speed up and catch my cue up in the end, right? There's ways beyond sort of content generation that this stuff exists. And also, you both kind of alluded to, and I just want to be sure we say it clearly, there's the algorithm that does the generation, and then there's the content that it's trained on that it uses to generate something. And those are two very different things, right? When you're using ChatGPT, it's scouring the internet, or what is the image generation?
Midjourney?
Midjourney and Dolly, I think, are the two. They're scouring the internet for images, and that's where we get the sort of inherent bias. But you can get the algorithm and train it on something entirely differently, right? You could train it on your entire body of work and say, generate something, and now it's going to generate you. Scary enough. So I just want to be sure we're clear about some of those distinctions.
Yeah, actually, that was what I was trying to say when I was sort of fumbling through the IP stuff. But actually, there's a designer who just showed in Fashion Week in September this year in New York called Colleen Estrada, and she has done this collection was the first time it was entirely AI generated, but it came from her feeding her past collections all into AI. And or to what I know we're using that term, but I don't know what tool she used, but she fed it into something that was large language, LLM driven. And then she got a new collection out, and then she tweaked. She didn't just take, I actually, if you Google her, you can read about this was still a process. Like, this was not just like, bing, I have a whole fashion collection. It took training the model to know her style, right? Her look, her brand, and then having her team look at what the output was and then fine tuning with the tool. I think that's fascinating. I mean, to me, again, and I've revealed my bias, so you shouldn't be surprised, but like, I think that's super exciting. I mean, I think that's revolution, not plagiarism, right? Like anyway, so yes, there are people doing this where they're taking their work. Now, when you're not taking your work and you're feeding in other people's work, that's where it starts to get into this, like, when is it plagiarism? When are you infringing on IP and all that stuff? But
well,
yeah,
when we were talking about this before, and at this point, please, if you have questions, throw them up into the Q&A, because clearly we could all three just keep talking. So if you have questions in the audience, just throw them up there and we'll squeeze them in. But as we were talking to prepare for this, it's probably no surprise to anybody who knows me that I'm a science fiction and fantasy nerd. I love that genre in all media. And an author that I read a lot of is Brandon Sanderson, and he cranks out books like mad. He's not writing them all himself, right? By his own admission, he's got a team of writers who have learned how to emulate his style, who create the drafts that then get edited through a process. In some ways, having a large language model that you feed with your own work is a really, really inexpensive way to get a whole team of writers to help you write a lot of work. And there's an artist who does these great prints of science fiction or fantasy themes that I buy lots of artwork from. He has a studio, and this is how artists for generations have worked.
oh yeah,
You have a studio, and they learn how to be you, how to emulate your style, and they recreate your work, and then you sell it under your name. Which there's lots of IP questions there too, but this is a similar kind of idea, using those algorithms to recreate your work in new ways is a really inexpensive way to have your own atelier, right? Like that's kind of wild.
Yeah. I was going to mention, this is the equity point, which is, in the past, you'd need a whole team of writers who are, paid for by a publisher or something like that. Now everybody can have something like that. And so you might think that's awesome. That's a way that, having this sort of, levels the playing field for people. Also, as you all mentioned, just as you can imitate your own style, you can imitate other styles and pass it off as either yours or somebody else's. And so I just want to highlight, basically, for any sort of like good thing that we could say or any bad thing that we could say, we could sort of, turn it the other way and say, just like any tool that's super powerful, it does wonderful things, it does terrible things. And here's yet, another tool that can, make entertainment wonderful in many ways and terrible in many ways. I mean, one way we haven't mentioned is, people have lots of really weird preferences about the kind of media that they consume, and some of it's really dark and evil. And of course, if these tools are readily available, then they can sort of generate that kind of content that you might think is deeply evil. And so that's a concern. But of course, we can tailor our entertainment preferences to ourselves in a really fine-tuned way, which is awesome. Again, when we do that, though, like there's no like common body of art that we all know about and can serve as a common language between us all. So, I mean, like you could just go back and look at the ways that this is wonderful, the way that this is, has costs.
Sure. Any questions from the group, from the audience? While we keep talking, please be sure to throw them up in the Q&A or in the chat if that's easier. I wanted to ask, and maybe I'll start with you, Erica, since you have a professed bias towards really being excited about this. There's got to be something that still scares you about it, something that makes you nervous or gives you pause. Maybe not, but is there?
No, there is. And it is the piece that now I'm sort of like, I'm embarrassed I didn't include, which is this bias thing. The fact that actually does really scare me. I mean, as someone who, I was leading an organization when George Floyd was murdered. And so we went into an arts organization, and we had that, there was this like, it elevated the conversation about race in the United States very volatilely and sort of aggressively, a conversation that we've been having for a long time. And so, of course, that led to all these conversations about DEI and equity and I went through some of my own training or personal exploration about my own biases and privilege as a white woman. And so that, I think, I've had a lot. That is the thing to me that I think freaks me out the most, is that I have been, and honestly, some of our political outcomings in the last few years have indicated how far apart this country is on some certain, like how divided we are on a lot of issues when it comes to equity, inclusion, diversity, all these things. And so I think that's the thing that scares me the most. And I actually have a very, personal, like tiny little example with that, but in using this tool Gamma, when I try to generate an image that looks like me, but that's like artistic, whatever, and I don't think there was one in this presentation, but I'm finding that anytime I put in a curly haired woman, I get a person with dark skin, which is interesting to me. And I'm a Gamma ambassador, which means I'm on their early development team. I'm one of their testers for Gamma. And so I shared that with the team to say that, like, why, just because that shows the bias, right? That shows, right, just very on the surface, like the assumption when I say curly haired woman is that it's going to be a Black or a brown person. I can get it to be white if I keep tweaking, and it's okay. And what I said to the developers at Gamma was that I now have had a minor, tiny little experience of what it's like when things are always biased to white people, right? Is that I kept putting it in. I was like, well, why is this Black? I'm white. But anyway, I also very clear that was like a very, it's so insignificant, but it's a taste of what it's like to be the minority, right? Or like be indicated that you're not the person that's going to get what the mainstream perception is. So that was a very interesting moment for me of like that. So that's the thing that scares me, Rich, is like that. How do we fix the biases in a tool that is incredibly powerful? To Eric's point, can be really scary when it's used certain ways or by certain people. And so that's the thing that scares the hell out of me, honestly. I'm just like, part of tackling that is trying to be part of the community that's training the systems, right? Because that's the way to change the model, right? Is to be in the system trying to break some of the biases. But I know that all I can do is what I can do myself, right? But anyway, that's what I'm afraid of the most, for sure.
I remember when Midjourney became really hot on social media about a year or so ago, and everybody was making historical images of themselves, right? There were a whole lot of my friends and colleagues who don't look like me, who were saying the images don't look like me, right? They're not creating anything that looks like my face or their face, because pronouns are confusing in this particular conversation. So yeah, the bias is there. Some questions have come up in the Q&A, which I think I'm actually really biased towards wanting the answer to this to be yes and to know what these tools are. But David asks, do we know of any AI tools that can do engineering or that can convert design drawings to construction drawings, or estimating, converting drawings to costs and things like that? Are either of you familiar with anything like that?
I'm not myself familiar with that. I guess I would be surprised if we have it yet, just because I'm not an engineer, but I suspect that at least there's just so many things that you have to take into account when you're engineering something like the lay of the land that you're sort of doing it on, and how do you model that and like feed it into a computer? You'd have to have very precise sorts of measurements. Now, it may be able to do it like sort of very generally and give you just general sort of quantities for the various things that you may be interested in, even today. But as far as I'm aware, I don't know of any sort of program that can do something.
Sure.
And I just dropped to you, Rich, because I couldn't put it in the public chat. So I don't know anything off the top of my head that does that specifically. But what I have done the last year is done a lot of tracking. I use Todoist, like kind of like I'm obsessed. And I have these lists of AI tools that I find compelling. This is a directory. They finally published a directory, so it's kind of making my own Todoist list redundant. But I just share this. I don't know like what happens. And to your point, Eric, these things are never straight ahead. Like it's not like this is why I will say I'm always a little skeptical, and I'm not suggesting the person that asked this is this way, but when people are sort of negative about AI and have all these opinions, but they've never used the tools, I'm also sort of like there seems to be a big gap in like having that opinion, but not really knowing the tool, because yes, all the tools take you start to realize very quickly how much they need humans. Like they're not going to output stuff that doesn't require some sort of support from a human being for the reasons we talked about in the characteristics we have that robots don't have. So anyway, this directory, you could play around with typing in certain keywords, but I just share that as a way for anybody who might want to try to find tools that do video, image, sketches to photographs. I mean, there's all sorts of music. There's all sorts of tools out there that are now being talked about through the AI lens. But to your point, Rich, we've been using AI, large language model data, for way longer than the last year. I mean, your Spotify playlist is another example of how it's been generated based on your tastes. That's large language learning. So,
I mean, the swipe texting, right? The slide texting on your phone is a version of that.
Finishing
I
your
happen to know
sentences.
David, and so I suspect I could be wrong, and David will correct me, I'm sure, publicly and privately at some point. But I suspect David is asking because it would be a really fantastic tool in the toolbox for people who do the kind of work that he does and I do, to have AI tools to do that. David, I think I'm going to check with some of my colleagues in construction engineering management. I've heard them refer to some AI generative tools that they're using in some of these spaces. So let me do some digging and try to get some information about that for you. And for anybody else, nudge your colleagues who are in engineering, particularly faculty in things like civil engineering or construction engineering management, if you're at an academic institution, because they're likely playing in that space a little bit. Are there other questions from the audience that we want to try to tackle? Are there questions that you have for each other, Eric or Erica?
Yeah, actually, I have a question for Erica, just about how how artists are experiencing this whole thing. I mean, I guess one, if I'm imagining myself as an artist, I would think, look, I spent like most of my life like developing this craft that I'm really good at, and I'm sort of unique, or I'm at least rare in this way. So now it's in many ways wonderful that like people can mimic the stuff that I do with almost no expertise or practice or any of that stuff. But it's also terrible because I become less scarce and then therefore like marketable. And also I have to become, as we were talking about before the webinar, I now have to market my stuff. I have to get online, I have to generate content to generate interest, to bring people to my website, and like you have to become a salesman. And I wonder how artists experience this. Like, is like, I imagine many people are like, I just want to create art. I don't want to have to be like a content creator. Also, I don't want to have to be a salesman or like drive people to my website. Like that's what the firm is for. That like I'm under, and they So I don't know, how are you experiencing this?
Yeah. I mean, I will say I can't speak for all artists. I certainly, in my sort of wanderings about this, have found artists who write very clearly, like you indicate, like I've been through, there's sort of this like, but I've been trained a very specific way. AI can never generate the complexity of a paintbrush stroke on a canvas. And sure, like that is they are entitled to that opinion, and yes, there are certainly artists out there. In fact, I don't know all the information, but my hunch is that that's still sort of the majority of artists are still feeling, and I think to me in some ways they feel threatened. Like I hate to use that word, but I think they feel threatened. It's like, oh gosh, now how do I, to all the things you just said, like they're not sure. It's like they do feel like their job is going to go away, whereas I would say, yeah, it might go away, or you would call that it's being redefined. And some artists don't want to reinvent themselves, like don't want to use the new tools. They want to keep making paintings. I guess I would also suggest that if there's that many artists, there's also maybe that many audiences or buyers of art that are going to feel that way. Like there will be people probably that never buy a piece of AI art, right? Because they're like, I don't believe it's art. So I kind of feel like that stuff is a little bit remains to be seen, and it might be beyond our generation and even our kids' generation of like where art goes in terms of like, are people even painting? Or in 50 years, are people painting? They're like, whoa, like it's like using a record player again, right? It's like, oh my gosh, we're back to what's old is new, is like, we're going to paint again because people are sick of AI art. For me personally, I have really seen it. I'm a classically trained violinist. So I can sort of, from that's not the artistic practice I'm doing now. I'm doing much more, styling and fashion and personal expression. But I can relate to this. Like I went through all this training. I have a music minor, I spent a lot of times in a practice room, in rehearsal spaces, and to sort of, I'm not a composer, so that's a little different, but to imagine that music can be written instantaneously almost with AI is kind of a little bit mind-blowing. So from that lens, I can get a little bit into that, like, wow, this is really scary and I feel threatened. But because I'm using it more to sort of serve my entrepreneurial endeavors. And to both your points, I mean, I don't have a budget for my business yet. So I'm sitting here, it's like I can't hire a bunch of people. So I'm using AI, and I'm using AI to do things I couldn't do a year ago because I didn't have the skill set. And it's sped everything up. It's made things move so much faster than I could have anticipated because of the access to some of these tools. So but I'm sure, it's interesting. It is the debate, I think, is where artists are going to fall on the spectrum.
I mean, I think there's some interesting analogies potentially with things like, the introduction of mass-produced paints, right? There was a time when part of being a painter was creating your own paint pigments. And I have to imagine that when mass-produced paints came around, there was a whole lot of, oh my God, nobody's a real painter anymore, right?
Right.
I had another analogy and it just fell out of my head because I'm noticing the time. I will say sort of another answer to your question, Eric, and of course this answer is informed by power structures and economic structures. The recent conversations and union challenges with the Screen Actors Guild, in addition to the Writers Guild, raised a lot of these kinds of questions, where a part of the agreement that the producers wanted was the right to use your visual image in perpetuity. And indeed, to hire you as an actor to come in for a day and be scanned 100 times for no project whatsoever, and then to just become a digital performer from there on out and not get any pay for that. And that there's reasons why you can understand why art would feel exceptionally threatened by that, why actors would. And so this gets to the questions about ethical and legal and economic frameworks that what's the guy from Jurassic Park? You were so excited you could do it that you didn't think about whether you should, right? That's the moment we're at right now. So okay, we are at 1 o'clock just about. Thank you all so much for joining us remotely, and Eric and Erica, thank you for joining us. This was a lively and interesting and I think beginning discussion about a conversation that's probably going to last us, I don't know, the next 50 years, I would bet. Again, thank you all for being here. Keep your eyes open for our next First Friday, which will be in February, where I believe we'll be talking to the designer of the new Disney's Moana show on one of the Disney cruise lines about the challenges of designing for a cruise ship, things that move back and forth in the water. Again, thank you all very much, and we'll see you soon. Bye.